In the quiet glow of the rehearsal hall, long after the dancers had gone home and the world outside had fallen into a deep midnight hush, Michael Jackson sat alone on the edge of the stage, tapping gently on the floor with the toe of his shoe. He often stayed late, not to practice, not to push himself harder, but because silence was the only time he could hear his own heart. Lights from the overhead rig shimmered across the polished floor like tiny stars, and for a moment he imagined himself drifting through them, weightless, untouchable, unburdened. But on this particular night, something felt different. There was an unusual heaviness in the air, a soft echo of footsteps that didn't belong to him. He looked up, surprised, and that was when he saw the small silhouette lingering hesitantly in the doorway. Little boy no older than 9, holding something tightly in his hands, as if afraid it might slip away. Michael blinked, unsure whether he was staring at a lost child or a strange reflection of his own past. The boy shifted slightly, revealing a shy but hopeful face, thin shoulders, and bright eyes that sparkled even in the dimness. Michael stood up slowly, taking careful steps toward him, worried he might frighten him away. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice a warm whisper. "Are you okay?" The boy nodded timidly but didn't speak. Instead, he looked down at the object in his hands, a worn notebook, edges frayed, pages bent from too much love. Michael knelt so their eyes were level. "Is that for me?" he asked gently. The boy hesitated, then took a small step forward and extended the notebook with trembling hands. The moment Michael touched it, something inside him shifted. The cover was decorated with pencil drawings, little stars, a moon, a pair of wings, and a small stick figure doing his signature toe stand. He recognized the innocence in those drawings because he had once drawn the same kind of things on the walls of his room in Gary, Indiana. He opened the notebook carefully, and his breath caught when he saw that each page was filled with letters written to him. Some were long, some were short, some messy, some neat, but they were all clearly written by a child who poured out everything he had. The first letter began, "Dear Michael, you saved me." Michael swallowed hard and looked up at the boy again. "What's your name?" he asked, barely above a whisper. The boy finally spoke. "Illy," he said softly, I wanted to meet you before it's too late." That sentence struck Michael with a force stronger than any spotlight glare or roaring stadium crowd. Before it's too late. Michael knew exactly what that meant. The gentle tremble in the boy's voice wasn't fear, it was acceptance, the kind no child should ever have to carry. He stood, gesturing for the boy to come inside. "You want to sit with me?" Michael asked. Illy nodded, and the two of them walked toward the center of the stage. The lights overhead dimmed further, as if the universe itself understood the gravity of the moment. They sat at the edge of the stage, legs dangling over the side, just the way children sit on the edge of a dock on a quiet lake. Michael opened the notebook again and flipped through the pages. The letters were heartfelt, painfully honest. One page read, "When I listen to your music, I don't feel sick. I feel like I'm flying." Michael's eyes softened. He had heard many things in his life. Screams from crowds that filled arenas, applause that shook the earth, critics that stung like arrows. But nothing pierced him the way those words did. He turned to Illy with a gentleness that only someone who had tasted both fame and loneliness could carry. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "This means everything to me." Illy pulled his legs up and hugged them to his chest. "Did you mean it when you said everyone is a star?" he asked quietly. "Even someone who won't be here very long." Michael didn't hesitate. He wrapped an arm around the boy's shoulders, steady and warm. "Especially someone like you," he whispered. "Stars aren't meant to stay forever. They shine their brightest knowing they don't have much time." The boy smiled, a fragile smile that carried both light and sorrow. He leaned gently against Michael, as if he had been holding that affection in his chest for years. In that moment, Michael felt something awaken inside him, an old ache, a familiar longing. He understood this boy. He saw himself in him, the child who wanted to escape pain through dreams, the child who found freedom only when music began to play, the child who held on to hope even when the world got too heavy. "What would you like to do right now?" Michael asked. Uli bit his lip, thinking, "Could you? Show me how you glide." Michael laughed softly, then nodded, of course. He stood up, offered his hand to the boy, and helped him onto the stage. The child was frail, his movements small, careful. But when Michael held his hands and took slow steps with him across the polished floor, it was as if the weight lifted off both of them. Michael guided him, sliding gently, letting their feet create whispering sounds on the ground. Uli giggled, a soft, airy giggle that seemed to echo around the whole hall. Michael smiled, and for a few minutes the world outside simply melted away. They glided together until Uli grew tired and sat down again. Michael knelt in front of him. "You did great," he said. "I felt like I was floating." Uli replied, breathing softly. Michael brushed a strand of hair from the boy's forehead and said, "You don't need to dance like me to fly, Uli. You already do." After a few moments of quiet, Uli looked down, voice trembling with something deeper. "Michael, could I tell you something? My mom says I shouldn't bother you with it." Michael tilted his head. "You're not bothering me at all," he assured him. "Tell me anything." Uli hesitated, then whispered, "Sometimes I'm scared, not of dying, but of being forgotten." Michael felt the words like a knife. Fame had never protected him from the fear of being misunderstood, unseen, or forgotten beyond the stage. He placed both hands gently on Uli's cheeks. "Listen to me," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "You will never be forgotten, not by your family, not by me, and not by the people whose lives you've touched. You're braver than most grow. Nups, you're a warrior." Uli's eyes glistened. "You really think so? I know so," Michael said, "and when I'm on stage I'll remember you, every time." The boy wiped his tears with the back of his hand. "Promise, promise," Michael whispered. The two of them talked for hours. About music, about dreams, about fear, about the stars. Uli told him how he listened to Man in the Mirror every night, and pretended he was strong enough to change the world. Michael told him how he wrote that song because he wanted to change himself first. The conversation flowed softly, like a stream under moonlight. There was no barrier between them, not fame, not sickness, not time. Eventually, Uli's mother appeared at the door, tears in her eyes when she saw her son laughing with Michael. She apologized, saying she didn't want to disturb, but Michael shook his head. "You're not disturbing anything," he said warmly. She sat beside them and listened quietly as Uli explained how Michael had taught him to glide. The mother smiled through tears. For a moment she saw her child free from his suffering. When it was time for Uli to leave, he turned and looked at Michael as if trying to memorize every detail. His smile, his gentle posture, the kindness in his eyes. "Will I see you again?" he asked. Michael knelt in front of him. "Yes," he said, "and until then, keep shining for me." Uli hugged him tightly, surprising Michael. It was a hug full of gratitude, fear, love, and innocence. Michael held him just as tightly, feeling the boy's heartbeat against his own chest. When Uli walked out of the rehearsal hall that night, Michael didn't move for a long time. He sat alone on the stage, clutching the notebook against his heart. He slowly opened it to the last page. There was a simple drawing, a stick figure of Michael holding hands with a small boy under a giant moon. Underneath it were the words, Thank you for letting me fly." A tear slipped down Michael's cheek. In all his years, through all the awards, all the records, all the applause, he had never received anything as precious as that notebook. He pressed it lightly to his lips in a silent promise. Weeks passed. Michael continued rehearsals, continued working, but something inside him had changed. He found himself gliding softer, singing gentler, smiling more to the dancers around him. The world expected perfection from him, but Illy had given him something far more powerful, purpose wrapped in innocence. Whenever he felt overwhelmed, he opened the notebook. Whenever he felt tired, he thought of Illy's laughter. And whenever he performed, he imagined the boy sitting in the front row, cheering quietly with that same fragile smile. They met again several times. Michael visited Illy at the hospital, bringing gifts. Small ones, thoughtful ones. He brought music, stories, and sometimes no gifts at all, just his presence. They talked about dreams, secrets, and the meaning of courage. One afternoon, Michael sat by Illy's bedside and let the boy trace the sparkles on his glove with a trembling fingertip. "Your glove looks like stars," Illy said. "That's because stars remind me of people like you," Michael replied. As months went by, Illy grew weaker, but his spirit never dimmed. He told Michael he wanted to write one more letter for the notebook. When he handed it to him, Michael felt a lump in his throat even before reading it. The letter was simple, written in shaky handwriting. "If you ever feel alone, remember I'm watching you from up there. Don't stop flying." One morning, Michael received a call, the kind of call that turns the world cold. Illy had passed away peacefully during the night. Michael closed his eyes, holding the phone to his ear as silence filled him like a heavy storm. He didn't cry in front of anyone. Instead, he retreated to the rehearsal hall, the same place where they first met, and sat in the center of the stage with the notebook in his lap. He opened it slowly, touching each page as if it were made of glass. Every letter felt like a heartbeat, every drawing felt like a whisper, and on the final page he read the last line again, "Don't stop flying." Michael pressed the notebook against his chest and finally let the tears fall. Silent, steady cleansing. They were not tears of sadness alone. They were tears of gratitude, of love, of a bond that had taught him something deeper than any stage could offer. That night, when Michael performed, the audience noticed something different. His movements carried new emotion, raw and alive. His voice trembled with sincerity. His moonwalk wasn't just flawless. It was spiritual, as if he were carrying a small soul with him across the stage. Later, backstage, one of the crew asked him what had inspired him. Michael simply smiled gently and said, "A little boy taught me how to fly again." Illy's notebook remained with him for the rest of his life. He kept it close, not as a reminder of loss, but as a reminder of love. A reminder that fame was not the measure of greatness. Connection was. That even a short life could leave an impact deeper than the ocean. And that sometimes the people who change us forever are the ones the world never knew. Michael often said during interviews that children inspired him, but he never told them about Illy. That story stayed in the quiet corners of his heart, where the purest memories lived. He carried it through every performance, every charity visit, every moment he reached out to those in need. He carried it when the world misunderstood him, when criticism grew louder, and when solitude became heavy. Illy had taught him that love doesn't need time to grow. It only needs truth. Years later, when Michael looked out at the stars from his hotel window during a lonely night on tour, he whispered softly, "I'm still flying, little man." And for a moment he felt the same warmth he had felt in the rehearsal hall, the warmth of a fragile smile, a tiny hand in his, and a notebook filled with love. Michael Jackson changed millions of lives through his music, but sometimes it was the smallest, quietest soul, the one without a stage, without fame, without time, who changed him the most. And though the world never knew Illy's name, his light burned forever in the heart of the man he admired. Michael had once said that stars don't need to live long to shine beautifully, and on the darkest nights, when the world felt cold, he would look up and see one star glowing a little brighter, a little warmer, a little closer to his heart. It wasn't just a star. It was the little boy who had changed his life forever.